Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, March 31st, 2020, and for today's video, uh, thought we'd do a video about the first 10 albums I ever got as a kid when I first started collecting music. Um, now, uh, got this idea from another YouTuber, Sea of Tranquility. Um, I thought, yeah, that might be a pretty good idea for a video, so let's give it a try. And lucky enough, I have not the original copies that I had back in the 80s, but I do have all of the first albums that I started collecting. I collected when I was a kid. So these will be pretty much in order. Um, and I'm doing this based off of memory, guys. This is going back probably. I started collecting late 1986, early 1987. Um, so that's going back almost 34 years. And, it's glad to see that I still have these albums. These albums still mean a lot to me, too. I still love listening to them. And, that first year was a lot of taping things off the radio and people, using their dual cassette players and copying me stuff off their cassettes. But these, I am proud to say that I actually did own official copies of these back in the day. So let's get started. And these are going to be in order. I was actually able to remember the order in which I got these. The first one, late in 1986, this would be Cinderella Night Songs. They're considered hair band, glam metal, whatever, but, this is what was popular at the time. So Night Song, Shake Me, Nobody's Fool, Hell on Wheels. A lot of good stuff on there. Had that on vinyl. And for those of you in the Northeast, maybe you live in Jersey or Pennsylvania, back in the day we had a store called Jamesway. That was a predecessor to a store called Ames. Well, at least our locations around here, because when Jamesway went defunct in like 94 or 95, Ames took over the locations. So, got that at Jamesway on vinyl, 1986. So, now these next two that I'm going to do, we got around the same time. We frequented the library, and the library would let you check out vinyl records back in the day. So these next two the library had, and we had them and wore them out. So, this one needs no introduction. Van Halen's 1984. You got Jump, Panama, Drop Dead Legs, Hot for Teachers. I'll Wait, the song that Michael McDonald wrote. You ever wonder what that song would sound like if he sang it? I'll wait till your love comes down. Anyway, and then also with that same album, this is another one that goes without needs no introduction. Genesis Invisible Touch. This album is good from cover to cover. A lot of people, a lot of your earlier Genesis fans don't particularly care for their work in the 80s, but I love their work in the 80s. That's when they were popular. The Peter Gabriel era produced, a couple of good songs. And in the, early, when Collins took over for the singing, those early days are pretty good. Follow You, Follow Me was good, and then the Duke album was really good, and Abacab was good, and the Genesis album was good. So I kind of like the late 70s into the early 80s and the mid 80s. Of course, Invisible Touch was 86, so it was the mid 80s. I like this rendition of Genesis. That album that came after this one, that We Can't Dance, not their best work, but Visible Touch, very special. So as far as, that Van Halen and Genesis goes, we checked those out from the library all the time on vinyl, and then I ultimately got my own copies of them. Again, at Jamesway. My sister's first boyfriend. Passed this one on to my sister, and then she passed it on to me. Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. This really needs no introduction. Everybody knows the singles that are overplayed on the radio all the time. But then, you have songs like Wild in the Streets, Raise Your Hands, uh, stuff like that. Let It Rock, great song. Wonderful album to have. So, and I still enjoy it to this day. I just don't play the overplayed singles that are played on the radio. Moving into 1987. Now this album, guys, I've had probably, oh God, more than half a dozen copies of this on cassette. I had a copy of it on vinyl. And, my original copy was on cassette. And that would be this guy here, Def Leppard's Hysteria. Cover to cover, this is good. There's no filler. In fact, there's even some B-sides that they recorded during the Hysteria sessions that would have been great on the album, but this album clocks in at over 62 minutes long, so they would have had a hell of a time fitting it all on a cassette if they had put it all on there. And even your typical CD is 74 minutes to 80 minutes, so they would have you add too many songs, it would have a hell of a time trying to fit it on a CD. But they were barely able to fit it onto a 33 1/3 record. Groove spacing between those songs was very, very skinny on that record that I had. But I gotta say, that was probably one of my favorites of all of these albums that I'm showing you right now. I've really enjoyed that one over the years. I wore out many, many copies of it. Moving right along through the year of 87. This guy came out. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Again, another masterpiece. You don't need me to sit here and ramble on and on about all the tracks. I mean, yeah, we all know the singles that get overplayed on the radio. But what I would say to people, there is a channel on here called Fit to Be Tie-Dyed. And he's a big Beatles fan, and I watch a lot of his videos. And like he said, he likes to think of, when you look at an album like this, everybody knows Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine. Well, there's also Rocket Queen, there's Night Train, there's Mr. Brownstone. It's so easy. You have to think of the whole album. You look at the whole album and see how how they fit the tracks together very nicely, and how it, look at the total package as a whole. Because he had actually discussed in one of his previous videos that there was another YouTuber who had discussed the White Album and how the White Album, could it have been a single album? If it had been a single album, it probably would have been one of the greatest albums of all time. But the fact of the matter is, the White Album was fine the way it was. Yeah, and it is what it is. There is no going back and changing it now. It's 50 plus years ago. So anyway, I like to look at the album as a whole. This is a perfect example right here, because this is the next one. I got this right around the same time as the Guns N' Roses album. This is a finely put together album. It's well produced. Cover to cover, this is good. Now, those of you that are, you get into Whitesnake, you think, oh, well, Is This Love and Here I Go Again are the only songs that they ever did that ever meant anything. Well, you should know that Whitesnake as a band it had existed for almost 10 years when they put this album out. And this album, you listen to it cover to cover. It's good. All of the songs. There is no filler on that album whatsoever. That is a tremendous album, and I am very, very happy to have multiple copies of that in my collection to this day. And in the box of cassettes over there behind the bed that I talked about in my previous video, I have a few copies of it there as well. So, moving right along, one of my friends at that time, her boyfriend was a vinyl collector, and he had upgraded his copy of, he knew I liked Def Leppard, and he had upgraded his copy to a newer copy of Pyromania. So, he passed his older copy along to me. So I had a fairly high mileage copy of Pyromania to add to my collection, but at that time, who cares? I put that on the record player and I enjoyed it. Again, that's another Mutt Lange produced album, strong cover to cover. you know, again, my experience with this album was 1987 into 88 for the first time, and I thought it was every damn bit as good as Hysteria, if not better, because you can really see them. This is not, I guess you could say it's commercialized, but still the rocking, their rock is stronger on this album. It's more of a hard rock album, not as commercialized as Hysteria. So what I would say to people, listen again, listen to that one cover to cover. There's a lot of really, really good stuff on there. Very strong, high energy album, and definitely worth the listen and worth the buy if you want to add that one to your collection. I love having that in my collection. Moving into 1988. Like I said, we recorded a lot of stuff off the radio, but this one we got for Christmas. Dad hooked up with his second wife. She knew I loved music. So they said, you know what? Let's get Dave something he's really going to like for Christmas this year. And it just happened to be that Pink Floyd's The Wall. I mean, I don't need to sit here and tell you about that album. Anybody that knows Pink Floyd knows The Wall and knows, you know, the story associated with it and how great the tour was. And, you know, just incredible, the incredible work on that album. You know, I know there are folks that like Dark Side of the Moon better, and I'm probably going to call that a tie as far as what I like, which one I like better. I like Dark Side of the Moon probably as much as The Wall. I have Dark Side of the Moon in my collection as well. I've owned several copies of that over the years, including one on vinyl. But as far as what I was collecting back in '88, this is the one I got. I got The Wall. And right around the same time, another James Way find. I got to take this one. I got this one kept in a plastic bag just so I can keep it for safekeeping. You know, of course, I loved hair bands. So we got this guy right here with the model Bambi on the front. And, of course, the tongue sticking out, which was, at that time, they, you know, they wound up re-releasing the album with a different, you know, with the black bars across the top and the bottom to cover the tongue, so you didn't see the tongue sticking out. That was the copy I got it. I got. They had a copy of this in James Way under lock and key. I wanted to get it really bad, and actually my sister had worked at that James Way at the time. I said, "Go, Amy, go in the home entertainment section. Get me that copy. I want it bad." But she didn't do it. She went to work. She did her thing. Drove her Ford Fairmont home, and you know, hung out with her boyfriend at the time. So whatever. You know, I digress. I didn't get that copy, but you know, many years later and several copies later, you know, here we go. This one here needs no introduction. It's got Every Rose Has Its Thorn on it. You know, Fallen Angel on it. Love on the Rocks. Look But You Can't Touch. Tearing Down the Walls. Mama Don't Dance. They did their version of that song. You know, they remade that song. So that was one, again, that was like another Christmas of '88 find, along with Pink Floyd's The Wall. And that is the first 10 albums I ever actually owned with my money. You know, not my own money, because I was a kid at the time. I raked leaves and did whatever to try and make a little bit of money and put towards it. But these were the first 10 albums I ever actually owned. It goes without saying, as a kid, I had a little crush on Debbie Gibson. So, of course, I know, go ahead. I had her album Out of the Blue. We had that on vinyl. And I had that Gregory Abbott, that song Shake You Down was popular. So I had a copy of that, too, back then. Wore them out. I think I shoved that one, and my cousin had a Teddy Ruxpin, and I shoved that Gregory Abbott tape into Teddy Ruxpin because I wanted to see it sing that Shake You Down song. That was kind of funny. Here, give me that damn bear. I want him to sing some R&B music. But, so that was kind of fun. But, so that's my 10 albums. And again, of course, goes without saying, everybody was recording off the radio back then and sharing tapes and doing dual cassette decks and recording off, if you didn't have the tape, you're recording off somebody's record player. and making tapes. So I had a whole bunch of other stuff back then too. I had a great big box, probably over 100 cassette tapes back in those days, and just some fun times. It was a lot simpler time than obviously the the wonderful world we live in today. But anyhow, I digress. We make the best out of each day, and on that note, we're going to bring this video to a close. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button and notification button so you get notifications. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you guys very much for watching.